Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. It is high time we made a beautiful gun rig. Now we're going to do this in two parts. First part, we'll work on our belt. The second part, we'll take care of our holster. Now, one big point. If you're new to leathercraft, this is a little bit more of an intermediate project. Doesn't matter. Dive in, because we're going to take this one step at a time. Nothing difficult here, but I guarantee you, you're going to be surprised at what you're capable of doing. All right, so anything I use in this video, WeaverLeatherSupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, get started. This is going to look complicated. It isn't. It's a bunch of steps, but we're going to take those one step at a time. We're going to make a beautiful gun rig. So let's start with our billets. Pretty standard stuff here. We've got our buckle side, room for our buckle, our keeper. We're going to secure that down with a concho and 2 rivets. On the tongue side, same thing. Concho, 2 rivets. Then we've got our size holes, and we'll drop in a buckle tip on this end. We need one more piece, and that's a keeper for the main belt. That's going to allow the tongue to slip in behind the buckle side and not move around on us, okay? So let's go to a digital pick here. So on our main billets, we're going 1.5 inch wide. On our tongue side, 14 inches long. And on our buckle side, we're going to go 8 3/4 inch long. Again, we've got room there for our rivets, our concho, and our belt tip. On this smaller piece, that's our strap for our main body. That's 8 inches by 5/8 inch, and we've got a hole on either end of that. Okay, over to our bullet loops. We've got a great video on measuring these out. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but there's a big point. If this is our first gun belt, there's something we need to take into account. We're going to do 2 sets of 6 shells because I've got a .45 caliber single action. That is one big bullet. We can put as many loops as we want on our belt, but our gun's going to weigh almost 3 pounds. We've got the weight of the belt, a pouch, a knife, and then 25 or 30 of those, that belt, simply going to be too heavy to wear. So again, we're going to do 2 sets of 6. That'll give us 2 full reloads. So on this, for a .45 caliber, and again, like I said, we've got a great video on these, but we need 2 measurements. We're going to sew these down. That's the right way to go. We'll talk about that, but we'll need 2 measurements. So our spread on our body, that's going to be 3/4 inch. The spread on our loops, that's going to be 1 3/8 inch. So with this, I'm going to add 6. So our total length there, 1 inch by 8 3/4. Now I mentioned sewing these. We can always go with an oblong. Never been one of my favorites. Also, we can simply add a rivet in between. Quick, easy, and to me, as cheap as we can go. We're going to sew these on, and it's going to look good. The better part is that loop is always going to hold that shell. All right, so we've still got some explanation here. Let's step over to our main table and talk about our main body. If you've ever worried about getting a good fit on a gun belt, it's as easy as this. And in fact, it's just like a standard belt. I'm going to take my waist size and I'm going to add 9 inches. All we're doing there on this end, our buckle is going to sit just inside the strap. Down here, the second hole. When we drop in our billet, the second hole is going to be about right here. There's our 9 inches. All we're doing is we're adding extra tongue. So a larger person wearing this belt, that tongue is still going to slip up under the buckle side. Now let's use me as an example for this belt. I'm a 35 inch waist. But before I call this, we're going to have an 8 to 9 ounce exterior. Then we're going to have a 4 to 5 ounce backing on this. So I'd like to add 1, maybe 2 inches to my waist size. So I'm a 35. I'm going to call this a 37. So let's add 9 inches to that. And that's where we are. We're at 46 inches on our length. Okay, so how do we determine where we're going to drop in our holster? Let's take our waist size and divide that by 4. So 37 inches divided by 4, 9 1/4 inches. Now right here, we could lay our billet in to get an exact measurement, but from that second hole to the center line, 9 1/4 inches. Now what you can do is take a tape measure, start on the front of your jeans, take that all the way around, right back to that point. Now we know exactly where 90 degrees is, or do we want that holster a little forward or a little backward. So again, easy to figure out. Now on the main strap, we've had about enough explanation thus far. We're almost there. We'll look at a digital pick here, but just a couple of quick points. Right here, we've got our holes to secure our billet. Same on this end. We've got our oblong here for our holster. And on our bullet loops, we're just going to offset those up just a little bit. So when the rim sits on the top of that loop, it's going to be centered on our strap. All right, digital pick. So our full length there, 46 inches, 3 inches wide. Our oblong, 4.5 inches long. We'll look at that in a little bit. We've got the marks for our holes and our billets. All right, that's enough of that. Let's start making a gun belt. I'm going to reset here. Let's cut some leather. It's going to be tough not to add a stamped or carved design on this, but we're going to keep it simple. And if that's the case, let's go with our V-cut double shoulder. Great buy for us crafters. It's a big piece of leather and it's one price. So if we divide the footage by the price, that's a good price per foot. So let's lay in our pattern here for our main belt. Now I'm going to come down to this point. We've got a wrinkle right here. We're going to cut this out, but by no means is this scrap. We'll cut our billets out of this. Now the best way to go here, an awl. But for the camera and myself, I'm going to go with ink. Not the best way to go, but let's do this. Let's make sure we get all of the excess ink off the tip so we don't have any accidents. I'm going to lay this in, put my straight edge on top of it, and now let's trace this out. And we're marked, okay? New blade, sharp blade every time. Let's cut this out. And I'm trying to cut just inside the ink line. And there we go. Good. We've got a nice cut. Now, on this end, this is our buckle side. Easy to figure this out. Right here, we've got our tab. So the shorter side, that's our tongue side. And on this end, our buckle end. So right here, we could clip this off. We could leave it right where it is. But how about a nice touch? Let's go with one of our corner knives. This is the 25 millimeter. Let's clip our corners. And like I said, nice touch. On this end, we've got a 3-inch width here. I don't have a 3-inch English punch. Not even sure they're made. Easy to do. So let's take some poster board. Let's cut a band 3 inches wide. Fold that over. And from the bend, let's cut out. So right there, I've got a 1.5 inch. That's a pretty short little tip. But right here, 2 inches. Not bad. So let's trace and cut this right to the end. Good, we've got that. Very nice. We've got a good tip on that. Let's reset and mark for our holes. And again, a little hard to get everything in the shot, but easy enough. So let's mark right here. And on our oblong, let's mark our 2 marks there. Good. Chisel and concho holes. And our last 3 marks for our buckle billet. And one last mark here. We've got our 2 marks for our oblong. So let's scribe in between those. Do our best to get a good straight oblong across there. All right, one more reset. Let's step over to our billets. Let's use part of the piece that we cut off from our main double shoulder. Now we're going to cut a tongue side and a buckle side, both 1.5 inches wide. So let's go with our wooden strap cutter, one of the most helpful tools in my shop. And I'm going to set that at 1.5 inches. So again, we're going to cut one of each. We've got those, all right. Let's trim to size and mark. Okay, we've got those 2 pieces marked. Now, for our last 3 pieces, 2 on our bullet loops and 1 for our belt keeper, let's go with a 4 to 5 ounce. So I'm going to reset. We'll cut these pieces out. Let's go with a piece I've cut off of one of our single shoulders. It's another great buy for us crafters. It's a smaller cut of leather, multiple weights, very affordable, but it's a good quality tannage. Notice the flesh side, very clean and tight. So right here, on our bullet loops, I'm going to cut 2, 1 inch by 8 3/4. Then I'll mark that. Same here for our belt loop. This is 5/8 by 8. I'll cut and mark this as well. Those are cut and marked. Good. Let's step over to our punch table with our main body. We'll start with this. We're going to lay in a liner, so we're not going to punch most of these holes. We just have to punch them again once we lay that in. So let's concentrate on our chisel holes. Now, we'll make this point. Even if we have to hand sew a liner, do it. Take the time to hand sew it because it's all the difference in the world in the way it looks, feels, and wears. Okay? So we're going to go with our 1/8 inch flat chisel. It's one of my favorites. Now with this, we're going to go with a 6-tine only, and here's why. So on our bullet loop strapping, that's 1 inch wide. So if we punch 6 holes, the strapping will get 4. We're going to have an extra hole on the outside. That's the way to do it. That's going to be secure. Now when we lay this in, I'm going to straddle my mark right between the 2 center tines, and I'm going to do my best to get this as perpendicular to this edge as I can. Now, if we're not totally sure, all we have to do is lay in a square, butt that to our edge, right to our line, or to our mark. We're going to nail it every time. But right here, I'm just going to eyeball this. And let's make sure we get the full tine through the leather. And we've got those done. Very nice. All right, let's get set up, knock out our billets. Let's start with our buckle side. So right here on this end, we're going to drop in a concho. So let's go with a 1.5 inch round end punch. And I'm going to push that right to the end, giving that concho room. Okay, we've got that. Now our oblong, we're going to sink this right between this set of holes. I'm going to do my best to get that clean and straight. We've got that. Now, for our rivet holes, we're going to use rivets to secure our buckle right here. But out here, let's use Chicago screws because we're going to be going through our face leather and our liner. So let's go with a 3/16 of an inch on these outside holes. And for our concho. Good. Now let's go down to a rivet hole for the inside set of holes. All right, we've got that piece. Let's go with our Horseshoe brand buckle set. We've got our buckle, our keeper, and our tip. This is going to look good on a gun belt. So on our tip, right here, we can use a 1 1/4 inch English punch to punch this out. Now, if we don't have this tool, we can always, there we go, we can always lay this in, scribe it, and then cut it. But this is as easy as it gets. So again, 1 1/4. And now let's come back in with a knife, and I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch on either side. Good. Now, let's add a taper to that. And there we are. Let's see how the fit is. That is perfect. It's snug, but right here too, we've got a screw. We'll screw that down to secure it. Okay, on the other end, again, we've got our Concho and 2 Chicago screw holes. So round in. Let's go up to our 3/16 inch. And we'll use this same hole for our size holes. And we've got that. Good looking strap. Okay. And over to our bullet loops. Let's step over to our 6-tine chisel. Again, I'm going to straddle that center hole. We'll have a tine hanging off either side. That's all we need. And let's make sure we get the full width of the tine through that strap. That'll make it easier when we hand sew. And last up, just a rivet hole on either end of this strap. And let's go back to our main table, work on our edges. Let's start on our tongue side and let's go with our groover. I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch. And right here, we're just going to groove starting at the end of our cut right there and around. No need to groove the tip. Good, we've got that. Okay, 8 to 9 ounce. So let's go with the number 2 edger, and I'm going to edge the same area on the top grain, then the same area on the flesh side. And the flesh side never edges as easily, but okay. That piece is ready to die. I'm going to do the same thing to this billet. And we've got that piece. Next up, our bullet loops. Now on these, let's start right here because we can always leave this right where it is. We could just clip that corner, but how about one of our corner knives? This is the 30 millimeter. Let's just put a nice touch on either end here. Yeah, there we go. We've got that. Okay, now let's groove. Good, we've got that. Now down to a number 1, and I'm just going to edge around the top grain. And those are done. Last up on our smaller straps, right here, let's groove and again edge just on the face with our number 1 edger. Good, we've got that. I've made a bit of a mess here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clean up, then let's work on our main body. All we're going to do on our main belt here is simply edge the top grain. We don't want to edge the back, but also we're going to sew this on a machine. So instead of dropping in a groove line, we'll come back in with our wing divider, drop in a guide for that. So our number 2 edger, let's just edge all the way around. We've got a good edge on that. All right, let's add one of my favorite dye colors. And that is a 50-50, 1-to-1 mix of our light brown Pro Dye and our mahogany Pro Dye. This is a beautiful color. It's going to look good on our gun belt. Now right here I've got a hook just made with some cheap wire from any hardware store because on a couple of our pieces we can just hook that. We're going to dip dye these. We can hook that and just run it through our dye. but on a couple pieces, we don't have any holes. Well, with this, let's take one piece now. Lighter weight leather is always going to be a little bit darker, so I want to move through my die a little bit faster on this. So let's just dip one end and then the other. Let's let the excess dye drain off, and I've got a rag here just in case that dye tends to stick, and it usually doesn't. But let's just mop that off. Same thing here. Okay, those are going to look nice. Let's set these aside. Now, with our pieces, we can just go with a hook on these. And last up, our main body. Let's do this the same way. And just mop up anything that we need to. Good. Okay, those look nice. We're going to give these about 2 hours dry time. We've given our gun belt about 2, maybe 2.5 hours dry time, and our die looks good, clean, and consistent. Now, it's a little bit flat. We're going to come in with our leather balm for a top coat. It's my all-time favorite. It's going to enrich our die color, and it's going to give us a little bit of a lower gloss. Now, to apply this, I've got 2 rags here. I've got a piece of fleece. This comes from sweatpants or sweatshirts or hoodies, and I like this because it's going to hold a lot of the leather balm. We're going to apply this very sparingly and very slowly. Simply going to work my way down. Then we'll come back and we'll buff this out with just a simple cotton rag. There we go. Now, the one thing we want to avoid is streaking and bubbles. We want to watch out for those, but if we go slowly, shouldn't be an issue. And let's work down to our end. Okay, let's set that aside. I'm going to do the same thing to the other pieces. We've got our last piece. Okay, now we could jump over to our belt, but let's do this. Let's step over to one of these pieces. So right here, I'm going to take our cotton rag, and I'm just going to buff. Yeah, there we go. That's what we're looking for. So next step, let's go back to this rag, and I'm going to hit my edges. Good, and that will darken our edges. Let's just wipe off the excess there. Yeah, there we go. That's what we're looking for. That looks good. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to everything else. And that looks good as well. This is going to be a beautiful gun belt. Now, when you add the leather balm, it may look a little inconsistent. Don't panic, just give it a little time. It'll wick in as it dries. Now, over here, we could certainly slick our edges. We don't want to here, but we could on these pieces, but I'm going to leave them right where they are because it's time to start knocking this together. And let's start with our bullet loops. Let's start here. We're going to make this easy on ourselves because with longer belts or say briefcase, a larger panel, what we can do is let's clip that into our pony. Now up here, I've got just a cheap plastic clip, and this is connected to my ceiling with a piece of suede, and I've got a loop knot in that. So I can raise and lower this as needed. So on our project, all I need to do is clip this on. Good. Now that's going to hold that sturdy. In my pony, we can pull our project down a little bit taut in our pony. Good. Very stable, very sturdy in front of us, but also we can move the clip up as we progress down the strap. So on our needles, John James, that's a number 18. It's my favorite hand sewing needle. It's a good needle. I've never broken one of these. I've been a few of them, but we're not going to go there. And on our thread, let's go with the Ritza. That's our 0.8 millimeter. Let's go with a nice bright white. It's going to look good on our die color. So on our loops, let's do this. let's take these and between our chisel lines, let's just press these up a little bit. Get those moving in the direction we're going to sew these. Good, we've got that. All right, up here. On our top line, first hole, I'm going to take one needle through. Good. Now, with our strap, I'm going to come through our first hole on our strap, second hole on our main body, and let's do this. Let's take our back needle, come through that same hole, do our best to follow the line of that first needle. There we go. All right. Let's tighten that down and go to the next hole. Okay, we've got that down through the last hole. Let's just come through from the top grain only. And all I'm going to do here is tie a square knot. But notice too, this looks like it's going to be pretty tedious. We've got to do that 14 times. But all told, that only took about 2 minutes. So good square knot on the back. Good. Now, we don't even need to trim that close because we're going to lay in a liner. Let's leave that right where it is. Let's go to the next stitch line. Now it gets a little bit more difficult, but we actually get the hang of this and we can move pretty quickly. So, second line down on the main body through the first hole. Now, first hole on our strap. Let's do our best to bring that up. I can find the hole, second line. And now, let's push that in. But what I'm going to try to do is open that hole up just a little bit and follow the path of the first needle. There we go. Okay. Now, let's pull that down. But on this one, we don't have to pull that super taut just yet. We'll do that on the next hole. But then let's go to the second hole on the strap and then the third hole through the body. And again, I'm going to try to follow the path of the first needle. We've got it. Yeah, not too bad. Now that we've got 3 holes in this, the rest of the sewing is not too bad because that's going to pull that straight. Yeah, there we go. All right, I'm going to do the last 3 holes here. We've got it. Okay, I'm going to do that 12 more times. And our last loop, in fact, a little bit tedious, but not bad. We moved through these pretty quickly. Now, we can sew this on a machine, but that's a skill I don't have. The folks that can do that really know what they're doing. But also, if your loops are a little misshapen at this point, it's not an issue. Once we get a shell in there, that's going to round out nicely. All right, let's go to our main table, drop in our liner. We've got all kinds of great options for a liner at Weaver, but the 2 things I'm looking for, weight-wise, I want something about a 3 to 4 ounce. We're 8 to 9 ounce here, and I don't want this to get too heavy. But also, I would like something that's got a little bit of a supple feel. We're going to go with suede. That hits both of those points, but it's also affordable. We have multiple colors, and it's suede, so therefore, like a saddle seat, it's got a little bit of grip. That's going to be perfect on our gun belt. Now, the rust, that's a beautiful color with our belt. But because we've got darker edges, and right in here in our groove lines, where that balm is sunk down, it's dark in that, let's go with a chocolate brown. Now, it's a little darker leather, going to be a little harder to see, but really all we're going to do here is we're going to cut and glue that to our main body. Everything else will be done from the face. So on our suede, let's look for our foot stamp. In fact, yeah, right there. And the only reason I say that is because at Weaver, both sides of the suede is beautiful, but that's technically the back side. Now, I'll remove this Poundo board once we make our first cut so we can better see what we're doing. But what we'll do is we're going to overcut this. We'll glue this together, then we'll trim to size using the main body. Makes the whole thing very easy. So let's lay this into where we've got at least 1/2 inch around on this side, and I'm going to cut 1/2 inch in right here. And just trim a little extra off there. Okay, good. Let's reset, glue these two pieces together. We're going to use contact cement to bond our two pieces together. Now, we could always go with a white glue just to tack it down because we're going to sew it. But over time, the two are going to separate. We don't want that. Now, on our main body, we did not edge the back, so I'm going to take our contact cement. We're going to go right to that edge. I don't want the two edges separating over time. On our suede, I just want to get close to the edge along this side and close to the edge down here, just so that when we lay this in, we have a little wiggle room. So let's go with our S18 contact cement. This is a great cement. Now we're going to need this on both sides, but again, let's do our best to get good coverage everywhere so the two pieces don't separate over time. And it looks like we've got good coverage on both pieces, all right. One rule with contact cement, we've got to have good ventilation. I've got a cross draft in my shop. It's not a problem, but we need to be cautious of that. Now, one more thing. Let's do this. Let's bring our main body back over. And now let's come in. Let's just add one more coat along our edges. Our edge is good, but right here we're going to have an oblong. So let's go ahead and add a little extra glue there. We're not going to sew that. We could sew it, we could lace it, but we're going to leave that right where it is. Now on our suede, we don't necessarily need a second coat there. Suede is great with glue. It really absorbs it. So let's give this about 10 minutes. Let that glue set, then we'll knock these together. And we've got ample dry time here. What I'm looking for with the contact cement is it looks dry and it feels dry, but it's tacky. That's what we're looking for. Now, typically, I like to take the softer piece and lay that on the piece with a little more body, but since we got the bullet loops, that's not really going to be that easy. But let's just do our best to lay this in. Good, we've got glue all the way around. That's what we want. All right, let's press this down. And let's pay special attention to our edges. But it feels like we've got a good bond there. Very nice. That already feels better. All right, let's reset, trim to size. Let's start right here on the end to get a good feel for this. So first off, our 25mm corner knife. Let's press that in. Now with this, as we push this in, it tends to want to come out a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is lean the handle out a little bit. Okay, now that we're going to cut, new blade or sharp blade every time, but I'm actually going to use the body itself as my straight edge. And there we are. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. We didn't have to fight to get that perfect. Very good. All right, let's scribe in a guide for our stitch line. I would like my stitch line about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. We can set our wing divider at 1/4 of an inch, but what's going to happen is as we push that down towards the table, it's going to pull this point out. So let's set this at about 5/16. Let's start right here and let's scribe our stitch line all the way around. Ample line there, I can absolutely see. Okay, let's go drop in a stitch line. And over to my shop, we are going to sew this with our cub. But a big point, and I mentioned this a minute ago, I'll say it again, but then I'll leave it alone, I promise. If you don't have a sewing machine, nonetheless, take the time to add a liner and hand sew that in, because I promise you, two things will happen. Every time you pick this belt up from here on, you're going to think, wow, that feels good. And your second thought right behind that is, I'm glad I went to the trouble to add a liner to that, because again, all the difference in the world. All right, so Over to our Cub, great machine for us crafters. Couple of good points. Easy to thread, easy to maintain, and very easy to sew with. Good point. It's a flywheel drive. We could actually take this to events if we want to. And one of the things, and I'll call it after this, but one of the things I find most helpful here, every time I have to adjust or remove or replace anything on this machine, every Allen wrench is right here, and those actually come with it. All right, so on our belt, we're gonna start about 2/3 over on our flat end, then we'll sew around, then we'll come back and sew about 2/3 over. That'll be our overstitch, but also that's where our buckle's gonna sit. So that's mostly gonna cover our overstitch. So again, let's start over here. I've got my guide. And how easy is that? And notice how effortlessly this sews. I am barely pushing on the flywheel, and we have got a pretty stitch line across there. Now, one problem, right here on our corner, I was talking and not paying attention and did not get a good corner there. Maybe we won't see that with our buckle, but nonetheless, I'm going to sew all the way around and back to our end. And let's do 5, maybe 6 over stitches. And there we are. Well, that certainly looks like a pretty stitch line to me. And trim those just a little bit closer. Okay. Well, I would say we've got a pretty stitch line on that. Very good. Let's go back to our main table, start prepping to put this together. Now we'll punch our holes since we've got our liner in. So our holes, we've got screw, concho, in between our bullet loops a concho, and on this end, 2 screws and a concho. Right here, we'll talk about that oblong. So with a screw or a concho, let's go with a 3/16 inch round hole. Good, we've got those. Okay, over to our oblong. There's a couple of ways we can do this. First off, we can always punch a round hole on both ends and cut between. It's not bad, but it never looks great. We could also use a corner knife, clip both ends and cut between. But we're gonna go with an oblong. It's a little bit more difficult to get this good and even, but an oblong, when we punch this, our edges actually curve down a little bit, like it's been edged. We didn't edge this. So let's start right here. And I'm just gonna do my best. I'm gonna put my oblong just past the end of our line. I'm gonna see if I can't get that as square in there as I can. And there we go. We've got one oblong. All right, let's stack this. In fact, clear that piece out because I'm gonna do the same thing again. But let's just do our best to see if we can't get that lined up. Not bad thus far. All right, just one more. There we go. It's not perfect. I've got a couple little points in here. We could shave that off with our knife, but actually that's not bad, okay? Back to our main table, let's drop in our tongue billet. Let's start with the tongue side because the first thing we need to do here is at our tip. Our buckle is 1.5 inch. We need to make sure buckle, keeper, and tip are all the same width, and love the detail on these. And our conchos, we've got a good antique nickel berry concho. That's going to be a nice combination. Okay, so we know our tip fits, but nonetheless, I'd like to add just a little bit of our Leathercrafter cement down across the tip, just to add that, or just to add a little extra power there to hold that on. Clean off our finger, good. And let's slide that on. Good, that clips right on. Feels secure. Got glue on me. On the back here, let's use our Allen wrench. Tighten down our screw. Good, I can feel that get tight down in the leather. Again, very secure. Next up, let's go with our concho. And again, same thing. I'd like to add just a little bit of glue into the throat of that to keep these from working themselves out. All right, on our top hole here, punch through that. And now let's lay our body over and see if we can find that. Good, we've got that. Okay, next up, we're going to go with 3/8" antique nickel Chicago screws. Same thing, let's put a little glue in the throat. And our pattern looks good. Our holes line up nicely. And let's screw these down. Great thing about the Chicago screws from Weaver, we've got a slot for an Allen wrench. I didn't grab it, but we've got a slot. And that glue will keep those from working out. So, okay, looking good thus far. Let's go assemble our buckle side. So over here, let's start with our buckle. Let's load this onto our strap. Bring that around. Okay, we're going to drop in rivets right here, and then we'll secure with Chicago screws. So let's go with a double cap rivet. This is the 7/16, the largest. So let's come through from the bottom. Now we can absolutely add this piece first. But what I'm going to do, because we're going to have a keeper in here, let's add that in between the two. Good, okay. Now, this is our 4-piece setter set. It's a great way to go. We can set rivets, line 24, 20, and Sigma. But one of the best parts is that anvil. We'll see that here in just a second. Okay, we've got that. Now, let's bring that around. And I'm going to sandwich that on that side. Come through with a rivet. Okay, let's put a cap on that, because it's one of the things I love about a double cap. We can snap these together without setting them. Makes the whole thing very easy. So let's lay this under that and set our rivet on the anvil. Good, we've got that. Okay, back to our main table. This is our last step. Before we add those though, we've got one more concho here. So same thing, a little bit of glue. Let's drop this in between our bullet loops. Good, that's secure. And down here, let's come in with our billet. We're going to let our loop around the main body. Now we're going to drop in 2 screws and a concho, but let's don't forget our keeper. That's going to sit right in between the two. And let's just make sure everything is tight, but our holes, they lined up nicely. We have a good pattern. That looks good. I'm going to clean up here. Let's get a better look at this. We've taken our time and we've done this right, and the outcome is a beautiful gun belt. Feels good. This is a quality project. Now a couple of points. I feel like I could get my stitch line a little closer to the edge. And right here, we just need another concho, but all kinds of possibilities. We've got a big empty canvas. We could stamp, carve, do a beautiful border stamp, and we will. But right here, let's see how our bullets fit. Now, these are going to be tight, absolutely, but I want these tight. And again, those are a little bit tight. They're going to loosen up though. But boy, that looks good to me. One last point. How's the fit? We sized this to land on the second hole. That's exactly what we've got. But beyond a good fit, we've got a well-made, durable, comfortable, good-looking gun belt. That's exactly what we set out to do. Now, all we need is a holster. We'll take care of that in part 2. But one of the big points of this video, we've got a feel for making a gun belt. Now make it your own, and I hope you knock one out of the ballpark. Good luck with your projects.